Excellent stuff. So welcome to Beth. Beth, would you like to give the good people who are watching a little introduction to yourself? Tell them that 30-second history of you.
30 seconds. I'm a bit older than that. We'll keep it to recruitment and experience in recruitment. About nearly 2 decades worth of recruitment, starting off in consultancy. Working predominantly with retail groups for an organisation that I absolutely loved. However, that hit turmoil in the first kind of recession, and I moved internally. So for the last decade, I've been working for 2 brands, both of which were at the very start of their journey, and helped to kind of move them up to being kind of middle-sized companies within the UK in hospitality. I then decided to set up by myself, kind of have a relocation and a job change, moved up to Glossop and started up my own consultancy called Cadby Recruitment.
We're going to talk about research and prep for that job interview process. And if I'm honest with you, research is probably not my forte. So I'm hoping to get some real tips from you about how I can be better at it and be better prepared. And I'm sure the folks listening and watching will undoubtedly too. So let's go from a starting point. If I'm thinking about making a job application, what sort of research should I be looking to do before I make the actual application?
I think it's twofold, both the role and the company. So firstly, if you tackle company, you need to look at the website. I suppose go onto Google, make sure that you've delved into what they're doing, where they are in the market, what their product is. Again, their website will be able to show you what their product is and what their values are and culture, and really find whether or not that company as a whole is aligned to you and your values. I think it's really important that people aren't just flying their applications out to anybody that's looking. Because ultimately, if you get a role with a company that doesn't share your same values or doesn't have the culture that you're looking for, it's not going to work out. 6 months down the line, you will be back at square one. So really important to do your research on the company. And then you do your research on the role. So pulling out the job description, looking at all of the points that they're looking for. Are they relevant for you? Do you have that background? You might not tick every box, but can you tick the majority of what they're looking for? Can you give examples on that? And then decide from there, is this the right job role, right company for me? And then apply.
That's some really good, simple starting points, isn't it? I think so. That research around the brand, absolutely key. What sort of things are you looking for, do you think, as an indicator that it might be right for you?
I think a lot of people are looking at stability. What have they done? How have they coped? How have they treated their staff? That would be really important for me. Maybe not so much for other people, but definitely one of the values that I hold dearly would be how they treated their staff, how they communicated throughout the crisis, and how they're looking to then effectively reopen to the best of their advantage. So that would be something that would be very important to me to research in at the moment. Again, going back to that product, do I feel I don't know if you necessarily have to feel passionate about the product, but you do have to have a liking, I believe. So for example, if it's hospitality, you've got to have a passion for good food. Now, you might not necessarily, if you go into a company that has more spicy food, you might like more plainer food, but you've got to have that kind of passion for great hospitality to the customer.
I think you make a really good point there about kind of, you've got to enjoy the basic elements of what it is you're going there for. Okay, so we've done some research on the website. We've thought about the job role. Sounds good. Okay, so then we're putting the application in. Now, we touched on this idea that we don't really want to be the person who's applying for every single job that you could shake a stick at, because we think it might be somewhere close to kind of fitting for us. We want to be a little bit more kind of focused, tailored and targeted, as somebody said to me the other day.
Nice, I love that.
Absolutely. And I think that does make a lot of sense. So we're going down this road, we're paying attention, we say, right, okay, we found a company that we like. Maybe that company isn't advertising for a role right now. Would you approach that business?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think being proactive, there's nothing wrong with being proactive at all. And so if you headhunt your employer, for example, so, find out about them, find out what they like, send a good resume, a good CV. With a covering letter that's very bespoke to that individual, that's going to stand out to them. And whilst there might not be a position at that precise moment, I can guarantee it will go into a little file where when a position comes up, it will be pulled out.
So would you say a good cover letter is a really important element of any application?
I think it is. I think it's bespoke. So either that or your personal profile at the top of this CV. Make it short and sweet. And I'm going to be really honest, or try to be really honest, both on the side of a consultant, but also having worked, for a long amount of years in internal, we just don't have time to read, a page worth of why you want the job. And I really do appreciate the amount of work that's gone into that cover letter. But if you make it short, precise, concise, it's going to actually get read rather than overviewed and then put to one side. Talk about the company, talk about their values, talk about why you would be an asset to that company, but make it, as I said, quite short. So a couple of sentences on each is enough for you to be able to gauge that person's interest, to then open your CV. They'll be able to look at your qualifications quite quickly and assess whether or not there's room for you within that company.
So roughly a good solid paragraph, nothing too excessive, succinct and to the point. So saving the stories for the interview feels like a good answer, but having those having those stories as part of that preparation as you're writing that cover letter, right? So you've got a couple of nice little lines that tie into the culture and values, a couple of lines that will tie into why the job is for you and why you are for them, and then just when you've done that, then obviously the next element of the preparation is thinking, right, okay, so I've sent my cover letter, I've put that application in, and I've been lucky enough to get that call to say, yes, we would like to meet you. First port of call for a lot of people now is going to be an interview in little square boxes on TVs and on computer screens.
Yeah.
What sort of preparation do you think we should be looking to do in around that idea?
I think there's kind of twofold. What I'm learning at the moment is that there are two different ways that people are recruiting. And one of them, as you said, is something very similar to this. And there's also the video interview with technology that is advancing daily. There's a lot of groups that are putting together video interviewing where you're not actually speaking to somebody. You get asked a question, you get 30 seconds to think about that question, and then you get 60 seconds to answer that question. So I think you need to because of the video interviewing, so and by that I mean the time limitation to answer a question, it's even more important to really think about what the interview questions are going to be beforehand and write them down and make them concise. 60 seconds is not a long time to answer a question. So you need to make sure that you've got a great example behind you, but make it very concise. So I would look at reviewing the job description, looking at the job advert, making sure that you've pulled the main points out of that on what they're looking for, and really thought about examples behind that. So, for example, if it's about project work, you're going to be a project leader. You need an example of when you've rolled out an efficient project. Now, it doesn't have to be a happy clappy example where everything's gone perfect and suddenly you've increased the revenue by X amount. It can be one where the project's actually failed. How did you review that project? What strategy did you put in to reverse that? And how did you then pick it up and then continue to roll it out to make that profit? So something that's a little bit more beefier than just your average kind of flaky answer. So yeah, examples underneath all of the job description points. When have you led a team? Talk about your team, how you've managed to progress them, how you managed to develop them. Have they left you? If they have, is it for another senior role? Some good kind of qualifying quantity-based answers. There's going to be questions as well in any interview that are very generic. So once you've done prep for one interview, you're already halfway for all of the rest of the interviews. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Why do you want this role? That kind of really common one. How do you manage people? So there'll be common interview questions, but there'll always be that oddball one that every recruiter likes to kind of have uniquely for themselves. And the job description tends to be able to gravitate to where they might be.
I love that. So going through that job descriptions bit by bit and looking at each and every line of that and thinking, right, what questions could come to me around that, and really building up your answers. Nice. That's excellent. So that question of what's your greatest weakness? What a question that is.
Isn't it just?
I mean, the very amount of times that you're going to hear the words, I consider myself a perfectionist at this point. Just let's be better than that. Let's try and be better than that.
Yeah, you're like, oh, yeah. I've got too many weaknesses. I can't even start going through them right now. But I have heard all sorts. But I tend to steer away from that. As an interviewer myself, I tend to steer away and actually ask for examples based on what they've done in the past. And I think kind of everyone has weaknesses, but it's how you learn from them and how you implement something and how you move on from them or how you accommodate them. So actually, if you've got weaknesses, how do you recruit a team and other people that will be able to balance that out from you? So even like if you say what your weakness is, then answer it from there about how you balance it out. Don't wait for the recruiter to then go, well, what do you do about that weakness? You can always then go, right, this is my weakness, but I've actually found what's been really effective in the past is to be able to review my team and make sure I've got a quality in someone else that will be able to, enhance that. So eye for detail, for example, not everyone has an eye for detail. That can be a massive weakness, especially, in any sector, in any job. If you can't review documents, if you haven't looked at the very, very fine detail, but then you have somebody in the team that actually loves that and can always review that with you. So
love that. So accept your weakness, but then have a nice sharp example of how you would actually manage that on a daily basis. Yeah,
how aware you are of it, why it's a weakness and what you do about it. Yeah.
Perfect. We're doing some prep for that job interview, and we're kind of thinking about that job role. And now we're going to go meet somebody face to face. What do we need to do to prepare for that? What steps do we need to take from the way that we present ourselves, the way that we carry ourselves, to the smart, intelligent, insightful answers that we're going to give?
I think so face-to-face, be that online or be that actual face-to-face, which would be a rarity for first stage interviews nowadays, I think. But it's all the same, dress. So we look at dress in particular. You're going to walk into a room or they're going to come online, and the first thing they're going to do in 30 seconds is make an impression on you. That's human nature, I think. I totally believe that. Anyone that says that they don't subconsciously will, but just maybe not be aware of it. But we're all tuned to the kind of fight or flight mechanism, as if when they see somebody is to assess that person. So if you're walking into the room, and make sure your body language isn't aggressive, but make sure it's not so relaxed. Just a good handshake and then I've also had people walk into the room that are so relaxed that I do have to question whether or not they want to be there. And throughout the interview, I think as well, you need to watch your body language, because you can tend to go introvert, cross your arms, be very shielded, which is natural because it's interviewing is a natural state. You don't do it for a living unless you're a recruiter, and then you're on the other side of it. But try and open yourself up. However, I prefer someone to be a little bit more nervous than they would really, really relaxed, because, there are people that I've seen that are so sunk down in their chair, like legs akimbo, that I'm a bit like, wow. So body language, I think your dress is important. I think it's important because it reflects the company you're going to interview for. So if your company is one that is a very suited and booted company, you should reflect that. It doesn't call for jeans, for example. However, if it's in hospitality, more so this way, tends to be smart casual. So jeans and a shirt, for example, is very appropriate, rather than you wouldn't want to walk in there in a three-piece suit if they're quite a casual diner. So really research, it goes back to that research part that you should have done prior, is to know exactly what your company is, what their target audience is, what their staff wear, and really reflect that. And I think if you're unsure about the dress, ask. There's nothing wrong with sending an email to the person that's going to be interviewing you and say, please, can you confirm what the attire is, if you're really nervous about getting that right. So
I guess as well, if you're going through a recruiter at this point, then they're the ideal person to be having that conversation with, aren't they?
Absolutely. And if they don't know, then tell them to go make their money and find out. Yeah, definitely. They should be giving you all this. Now, as a recruitment consultant, I would tend to be very wary of spoon feeding any candidate that I've got in terms of going forward for a company. I would like them to come and tell me what the company is about, what they should be wearing, etc. And then I will give them opinions and tidbits myself. But I think if they don't put in the work when it comes to research, then when they go in for that interview, they will be relaying your words, not theirs. And a recruiter can, a cunning interviewer really can be able to pick that apart and see that they're not necessarily lying, but it's not really them that's speaking. So I would advise any candidate to really do their homework themselves.
So going away and doing that research again, thinking about kind of what does that business represent, how are they dressed, and then really trying to kind of mirror it, I guess, rather than kind of replicate it identically, but mirror it as much as you possibly can do.
Absolutely.
While still trying to demonstrate a little bit of your own individuality and personality.
Absolutely. I think if you go into an interview dressed in something you do not feel comfortable in, again, your body language is then going to reflect that, which is then going to make you uncomfortable and probably forget the questions, and it's going to make your interviewer uncomfortable because they're going to notice that. So I do think that there has to be an element of you feeling relaxed. And again, that goes back to actually researching the company and making sure that their kind of culture is not too far off something that you would feel comfortable in. If you're looking at joining a company that the culture is so diverse from what you're comfortable in, maybe it's not the right company for you.
Absolutely. All right. So we're in the interview. We've blown them away with that first impression, and they're starting to ask some questions. If they ask us a question that we're just not sure about, and we just kind of think, total mental block. I think we've all been in that position where somebody's kind of thrown something at us and we just think, what's the reaction? What's our best choice at this moment?
I think it's honesty. I've had a lot of people clam up on me. I've had a lot of people that are very, very nervous. And people that just don't understand the question. So sometimes with a question, it's not that you can't answer it, it's because of the way it's phrased, that our brain can't process it. No, it's kind of twofold, because I would encourage a good interviewer to be able to rephrase that question or to break that question down into bite-sized chunks that person can then answer. But if they're not doing that and you really have a mind block, then just say that I'm really sorry, but can we come back to that question? I just need to think a little bit more about a good example to give you. Because if you answer it, but you just go off on a massive tangent, then the interviewer's going to sit there going, what did I ask?
Take ownership of that and just accept the fact that, yes, you might not have an answer immediately, but if we can come back to it, then I'll be able to give you a really good example again. That works really well. It's within some of the questions they're going to ask us. There's a thing called a competency-based question, and I think you kind of touched on it earlier. How would you define a competency-based question?
I think it's the definition to answer a competency-based would be to make sure that you're giving an example. So you kind of use the use a STAR process, which is situation, task, action, and result. So you're really going through an example on that competency-based question. So it can be something like, give me a time when, or give me an example of. And with that, you really want to have a sound example or situation on your past that kind of gives them, as I said, that situation, what you needed to do about it, what action you took, and therefore what was the result. And kind of going back to previous on what I've said is actually sometimes the best answers that I've ever had are ones where something has impacted and they have shown their resilience and been able to adapt accordingly rather than the perfect situation. So it could be simple as give me an example of when you've given great customer service. It could be a question, and again, you'd give the situation, you'd give what you needed to do. So maybe a customer was complaining about the quality of food, so the situation was that the task was that you had to take them or resolve that issue. The action you took was to take that dish away, and the result was that you brought them back a perfect dish and the customer was happy. Something, I mean, that's a very, very simple one.
But a really good example. And I think, I mean, it's one of those things where I think when we think about giving examples of when things have happened, we always try to instinctively give a positive thing rather than actually, I think you're right, when you face challenges and how you've kind of overcome those challenges within the business can actually give some really good, useful insight into you as a person and certainly as a leader, I think.
Definitely. And no one's perfect. You know, we all like to think going into an interview that all of our answers need to show how perfect we are and how we always get results and how our team are glowing and, you know, how every project lands and how the business is making millions thanks to us. But actually, in reality, is that really going to be the case? And I think it shows your honesty if you do say, you put in a few examples of when things might not have turned out right and how you've dealt with that. Yeah.
Because it's happened to us all is the simple.
God, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone through this process. We've done the interview. We've answered all their questions, and an interviewer says to me at the end of it, Kieran, do you have anything that you want to ask me?
Good questions. Yes.
It's a hard one, isn't it? Because
it is. Yeah.
I mean,
I think sometimes what makes people stand out are just good questions. So in hospitality, I would always kind of go with more of about their kind of culture, values, what training programs they have in place, do they have an academy, that real kind of people person questions, not so much of no, I don't. So anyone that goes, no, I don't have any questions, I kind of think, well, do you really care about this role enough? Because the job description will never give you everything you want to know about the company. So even if you've done your research, which you should have done, and you know about their training programs and their academy, really use that research and ask them the question of, I've seen that you use XYZ supplier to do your training, how successful are they, or how many people have finished that program, something that actually tests the interviewer as well. It's always the questions. I always get asked the question of why did you join the company, and why are you still here at the company as an interviewer? And do you know what? I don't mind those. That when I say generic, that's actually quite a good question. And I think it brings it down to that personal aspect. So if you want something that's slightly less intrusive, I'll probably ask that. But what I would do is do your research and really pull out different things about on their website, on the About Us page, and normally about training kind of and progression and growth and development, or something that really interests you, something that you actually really want to know.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really your last opportunity to stand out and be memorable for the right reasons, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I've had, someone ask, why have you joined this company? And I've also had, when we go back, and sorry, I'm kind of like going to detour on this, but when we go back to that research part, it's really important not only to look at the company and their competitors and the growth and projects, culture, values, challenges, and the product that company is, but it's also really important to do research about your interviewer. You know, you can do a deep dive on them. It is slightly stalkerish, but, you know, why not? Find something that you've got in common with them.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking.
Gosh, is that it? It is. And I've really enjoyed meeting you and having the chat with you.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
So, thank you.